Hey, my name is Dr. D-Flo, and in this video we're going to do some work on my M2 MakerGear. So I've had this printer for about 5 months, and it's worked flawlessly up until this point. But as I was printing out the last part on the 3D printed 3D printer, it started throwing errors. So I contacted the MakerGear staff, and it turned out that there was a problem with the Rambo controller. So they ended up sending me out a new one, but now I have to unplug everything and plug it into this board. So I decided that while I was messing with the electronics, I would upgrade my M2 MakerGear to have a dual extruder. And it's going to be exciting because we're going to work with some different support materials and the most expensive filament that I've ever printed with, conductive filament.
Dr. D-Flo.
Three and a half hours later, after finishing everything, the last part that needs to be put into place is the filament guide tube. And look at how unsatisfying this is. This hole is way too big for the guide tube that they gave me. Overall, the dual extruder upgrade was pretty easy. I only had 2 complaints. The first was the loose fit on the guide tube, and the second was the wire management. With a single extruder setup, I would argue that MakerGear has the tidiest but most convenient wire management. You can swap an extruder in under a minute. However, the wire management for the dual extruder configuration felt like an afterthought, and the provided housing put a lot of stress on my cables and their connectors. These concerns were quickly overlooked when I saw the print quality. Printing in 2 colors really adds another dimension to the prints. The thin shroud you see me removing from the prints is called an ooze shield. It prevents contamination between colors. Using the ooze shield adds more time to the print. It took about double the time to use dual versus single extrusion for a part. With a dual extruder setup, you can use different filaments for the perimeter and the infill. This way, if you need a red part for your color scheme, but you only have a little bit of red left, you can use the red filament as the perimeter and another color, say white, for the infill. Using support for more complex prints can leave blemishes and can be hard to remove. With the dual extruder, you can use your second extruder for specialized support filament. I am using a white PolySupport filament, which is a slightly flexible filament made by MakerGear, and I'm also using normal PLA for the part. Because of its flexibility, PolySupport peels off much easier than if the support was made out of PLA. Alright, so this is the most expensive filament that I've ever purchased, coming in at about $1 per gram. So what makes it so expensive? Well, it's conductive filament, so this can be used almost as wires. You can literally 3D print circuit boards. But the reason behind its cost is this value right here. So most conductive filaments today have really high resistance values, but the resistance value of this filament is only 0.006 ohms per centimeter, which is only 10 times that of 22 gauge wire, which is really revolutionary, even though it sounds like a lot more. So let's go ahead and get it open. So I bought 100 grams. Let's see what it looks like. Oof, that is disappointing. That is 100 grams of conductive filament. $100 of filament. Can't even fill the spool. This stuff is actually extraordinarily soft, so it requires very low temperatures to print. So it's got a lot of protection against moisture, so I hope that this will last for more than a couple weeks outside of its vacuum sealed bag. I wanted to create a nameplate with D-Flo spelled out like the traces of a circuit board with the conductive filament. Then I would place the LEDs between these traces to make the letters light up. I used Adobe Illustrator to create the sketch. I then exported it as an AutoCAD drawing so that I could import it into SolidWorks. This will be a quick tutorial on how to create dual extruded parts. You need 2 STL files which will both be assigned to one of the extruders. Therefore, we need 2 parts. For this project, we will need a part with the D-Flo cut out of it and then a part with just the D-Flo traces. We will then assemble these parts and export them as STLs. It's important not to skip the assembly or else the 2 STLs will most likely not line up when you put it into your slicer. Here are both extruded and cut into the block at the same distances and use the face of the block as a reference plane to split the extrusion and block. Now I'm in the assembly and the pieces should meet seamlessly. When you save an assembly as an STL, you should get as many STLs as you have parts in the assembly. I prefer Simplify 3D, but Cura is a freeware that also works for dual extrusion. Simplify 3D has a dual extrusion wizard that will help you get set up. I had to print the design face down because I found that if the conductive filament sat in the extruder for too long without moving, it would become clogged. So by printing in this orientation, the conductive filament would be used immediately. I turned on my heated bed so that the part would become soft so that I could press the LEDs into the conductive filament to ensure contact. So here's the disappointing part. I hooked up the circuit to the 5-volt pin of my Arduino and nothing. I never thought to check the conductivity of the filament because it was advertised as the filament with the lowest resistance. I printed out a little cube from the filament and stuck 2 copper wires in it to simulate the pads of the LEDs. I pressed the block down to make sure there was contact. I checked the conductivity of the copper wire to make sure that my multimeter was working. It was. Then I checked the conductivity between the 2 wires, and nothing. I have seen demonstrations of this conductive filament working on YouTube, so I spent a couple more hours with different 3D printing settings in different shapes and thicknesses, but it was never conductive. Maybe I received a defective sample, but I think I can conclude that conductive filament is still not plug and play. Let me know in the comment section if I made a mistake. I will re-upload this video if I get it to work in the future. Thanks for watching.
Subscribe for more Dr. D-Flo.